I guess right now we should start the show.
Who's this suspicious character strapped with the sounds profound, similar to rounds spit by derringers? You're in the terror dome like my man Chuck D said. It's time to dethrone you clones and all you knuckleheads, cause MCs have used up extended...
Hello everyone and welcome to our project. I am Kip Biby.
And I'm Jacob Law.
And we are covering document 72.
Yeah, document 72 is Robert Owen in his speech on the first discourse of a new system of society. Kip, what is his envision of a new system of society?
Well, thank you for asking, Jacob. His envision for a new sense of society. A little context first. So in 1825, there was an increasing economic inequality among Americans, and there was also intense competition economically. So this led to the pop-up of these mini societies or communities that were based on equality and harmony, what today we might call socialism or communism. Those words weren't really in the zeitgeist yet, but it was kind of the first rumblings of that in America.
Yeah, and Owen was a British factory owner, and so he saw at firsthand some of the inequalities in the economic workplace. And he started his Harmony community in Indiana because he envisioned that he could create a utopian society where everyone was equal. And so what he did was he went to a hall outside of the House of Representatives and spoke to Americans. And this was one of the first times that someone who had socialistic beliefs in America was taken serious.
Right. So his idea for a society was that everyone, or I guess his community, was that everyone works and everyone has a job, but there's no wealth or poverty. It's basically everyone is equal. So it's like what it would be, I guess you could say, communism today. And the idea was that this is the only way, this is the cure to American unhappiness. He was not a subscriber to the laissez-faire ideas that John Locke or other philosophers would have advocated for.
Yeah, so we did some research on some philosophers that we think would agree with him and disagree. And in terms of agreeing with him, one of the names that came to mind immediately was John Stuart Mill. Mill was from England also, just like Owen, and he believed in helping ordinary people with a system that would create a more equal division of profits. And he also was for women's suffrage and was completely against child labor, some of the things that people began to fight for soon after Owen, and it's still being fought for today.
Right, and without child labor, though, what did they have Nikes back then? All right, another philosopher, I mentioned John Locke, but one, I guess, more modern philosopher that would be an opponent of Owen would be Ayn Rand, whose philosophy of objectivism involves the free market, capitalism, and above all, working on your own self-interests. So everyone is, I guess, the general consensus is that there's no such thing as a utopian society, but these philosophers and these business leaders and everyone are kind of fighting for their version of it. So in Owen's view, it's an equal society where, and I think he mentions in the document too that they want to use the best science and the best advances in business and industry, and I guess that's kind of the goal of everyone, but except for maybe the Amish. But Amish. But how do you get there? How do you make your society happy is the question. And Owen used like kind of the idea of communism as a way to get there.
Yeah, and Adam Smith, who we've discussed in class a little bit, was a little before Owen's time, but he was a laissez-faire thinker, and he actually argued that the world would be a more progressive place if we believed in our own self-interest and we believed in having a free economy. So I think he would have disagreed with Robert Owen's stance that the best way to reach a utopian society is for everyone to be equal. I think Adam Smith would believe that the happiest a society could be is if it was working with everyone's own self-interest and people were worried about themselves rather than trying to rule everyone else in the factory or everyone else in a community or a country.
And I'm going to make reference to a book called Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, who depicts a society where the government is using their power to try to create more equality, try to help out the little guy, they say a lot in the book. And the end. I mean, this is of course a fiction book, but it does paint a picture of Owen's idea of a utopian society. Basically, Ayn Rand's idea is that when you're working on your own self-interest, when profit motive is what drives businesses instead of charity, there's a lot more progression in terms of business and in science and in medicine. That's kind of what I subscribe to. I'm more of a laissez-faire capitalist. I don't agree with Owen really in the slightest. And to be honest, he reminds me a little bit of the Manson family. Not that he murdered any actresses, but his little community reminds me of the Spahn Ranch. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Manson family, but they're not good people. Is Owen like Charles Manson, Jacob?
I don't want to take too much away from Owen. I don't want to sound like we're attacking him, because during this time, it would be easy to come up with some socialistic ideas when you look at some of the conditions people were in while they were working. And I think he did a lot for the common worker, but his philosophy as a whole is a dangerous philosophy for a government or a community to go down.
Right, because during this time there's also the fear of a tyrannical government, because they've just seen it recently. So I guess I do understand both points. At that time, I'm sure there was probably definitely issues with child labor and with I mean, you always see those old westerns with the railroad tycoon in the boxcar, the fat guy with the pocket watch. I guess that's kind of the idea they had of the wealthy, or at least Owen did. So I understand. But all right, anything else you want to talk about, Jacob? I don't know where we're at with time.
I think we covered most of it. I guess we should reach a conclusion on what we think of the document. I think I could speak for both of us in saying that we don't really agree with Robert Owen, and the idea of a utopian society just isn't really reachable. In pure communism, it's just not. It's not something that can be attained, I think.
Yeah. I think one of the big issues with it, and this is just one of many issues with communism in general, is that when you're not making any profit from your work, when everything is shared, there's not incentive to work. So as soon as everyone is making the same amount of money for different amounts of work, if you work at the general store and you get paid just as much as let's say you're the CEO of a company and you get paid just as much as the guy that works, sweeping the haircut place, then why is the CEO putting in so much work to make the same as someone who does a job like that? So that's my big issue, or that's one of the big issues with communism in a utopian society, or a utopian society such as this, at least.
Yep, I think we covered most of it.
All right, I think we're all set then. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening. Again, we are Jacob Law and Kit Biby, and we covered Document 72.